This person writes and says, I've been working too much lately on a couple of big projects at work and trying my best not to feel like a victim because I haven't had a day off in 2 weeks. That makes me tired just hearing. We are wise to consider the benefit of days to rejuvenate. Sometimes we can't, though. Like you said, big project at work, you're stuck, haven't had a day off in 2 weeks. And it can become quite a grind. Overworking just saps the soul. Sometimes it's not avoidable. Often it is. We just need to be aware of the effect that it has. That's all I'm saying. I'm not telling you you should or should not have worked this hard. You say, one of my teammates is leaving next week, and we're not replacing her for now. So I'm picking up several of her projects, and I will be even busier. Great. I've heard many people say this, and employers do this all the time because if they can get away with it, why wouldn't they? Everybody's just working themselves to the bone, and somebody has to be gone for a little while, and the employer goes, well, let's see how we do without replacing that person. And if people are willing to shoulder the burden and not say something, then the boss goes, well, dang, I just saved an entire salary of a person, not realizing that they're also in the process of slowly destroying their staff. So you already start off by saying, I'm working too much. Now you'll be even busier. It's just happening everywhere. So employees are overworked, they're frantic, they're making mistakes, which cost the company money and cost time. They hate their work, they end up quitting. It has a really terrible effect when employers do their very best to stretch their employees as thin as they possibly can. So you have to do something here. You do. You have to grow up, be a grown-up, and do something, as opposed to just going, oh, wow, this is terrible. Because as we've talked about before, whining or complaining, whining is not a step. So you require your employer to state, I'll say his, I don't know whether it's a his or her, who doesn't matter. State his priorities. You say, I'm already at my limit. I already was. I haven't had a day off in 2 weeks, been working my tail off, and so is everybody else in the office. I'm not like an exception. And because this person left, I just got handed 2 more projects. It is just a statement that I cannot do a good job with everything I had before and 2 additional projects. Can't get them done on time and can't get them done well. It's impossible. So you show me, here's the list of my 9 projects altogether. You show me which projects have the highest priority for you and which ones can wait. I can't tell you the effect that, because I've helped hundreds of people do this. It takes like 2 minutes to do this. It lets you know what matters most. Employees come back to me all the time on the phone, by email, otherwise, and they say, I'm stunned. It turns out that 3 of the projects, he didn't care if they got done for another month. And here I've been busting my tail night and day trying to get them done at the time that he said. And he went, oh, I just gave you that time off the top of my head. And the customer's not going to really need that for another month. So it lets you know what matters most. And it lets your employer know that you're overloaded. Something that he would prefer to just push to the back of his mind or not think about. And so he doesn't notice. He sits overworked in his office. He'd prefer not to look around for more work for him to do, which would mean, going through the work of hiring another employee or asking everybody how happy they are. So now, simply by saying you state your priorities, he's still the boss, you're doing what he wants, but now you're not overwhelmed. This really works. Out of all the times I've done this with people, I'd say maybe 2% of the time, really low, has the boss just said, well, too bad that you're overworked. You're just going to have to work harder, I guess. In which case, what are you doing working there? Really? It's sucking the life out of your blood. You have no days off. all you do is work, and you just got more work, and the boss doesn't care. Goodbye. And those 2% of people who have come back with that answer, I've said, quit, they have. Everybody's happier. New subject. We have a brand new teammate, 2 work questions in a row, working on a temporary to permanent basis. That's a very common thing in the workplace. It's pretty smart on the way of employers, too, to have a temporary agency screen employees, rule out the ones that are obviously not suitable. They're hired temporarily so that then if the boss decides not to keep them, he doesn't have to go through all the documentation and the writing and the complying with federal regulations and state. No, he just goes, we no longer need your temporary help. Poof, goodbye. So we have a new teammate, and you say, I am training him, and he'll work on projects under my direction. I tend to be direct, so my words don't always come across as loving. I need help with loving words to say to him. Actually, I'm impressed. The fact that you would ask, the fact that you would notice that you're direct and sometimes don't come across as loving is huge. And then to ask for help at coming up with words. Keep in mind, I'm not telling you the words to say. I'm just giving you examples so that you know that there are words to say. And then you can modify them and do whatever you want to with them. So here's what I want to say to this new temporary to permanent employee. I want to say, please stop interrupting or talking over me when we're in training or sharing information. So apparently this person that you're training interrupts you and talks over you and gives you his or her opinion. So instead, you could say something like this. It's my job to help you make the transition to permanent employment here, which apparently is something you wanted to do, or you wouldn't be in this temporary to permanent situation. So from time to time, I'm going to tell you what is interfering with that goal of your being prepared to fill a position. In short, I'm helping you, not criticizing you. Now, you see how loving this is? This is loving. People often ask me, what does loving look like at work? This is an example. As opposed to just going to the boss and saying about this temporary person, not going to work out. Loser, interrupts, talks over me, unteachable, goodbye. You could get rid of this guy. And by the way, that's something you could tell him. In a loving way, you could say, I'm not criticizing you. If my goal were to criticize and attack you, I could have you out of here by tomorrow. That's okay to say, so that he'll pay attention. If they don't, I wouldn't have that be my lead line. You continue. When I'm training you, you tend to interrupt or talk over me. And that's far too distracting and time consuming. It makes my job harder. If you do it again, I will stop you right then when you do it and say, this is an example of the interrupting that I was talking about. Keep in mind, this is all for your benefit. If it were for mine, I would just say, get rid of you. So you don't need to do anything, but you can tell him, you would be wise to listen to my suggestions because I'm trying to help you accomplish your stated goal. That's a pretty sweet thing to do. You continue. If you listen, you increase your chances of permanent employment. If you don't, it will have the opposite effect because I want this workplace to be pleasant. And if you don't fit into the workplace, I will do my best to see to it that you don't stay here permanently. See? It's loving both ways. If you help him and he listens, that's obviously loving. If you help him and he doesn't listen and you try to get him fired, it's still loving because you're preserving the cooperative, non-interrupting atmosphere of the workplace. Loving in the workplace appears to be tricky. It's not. It's your attitude. I want to help this person, but I also want to help my business. I also want to help my boss, the guy, puts his signature at the bottom of the check that enables me to have a house that's heated and cooled. A second thing from you. You say, while we're training or we're under a deadline, I am not interested in hearing how they do things or did things at your old job. There is a time and place for sharing ideas. During training and or during a deadline is not the time. I would tell him almost exactly what I just said earlier in response to stop interrupting and talking over. You say, this isn't helping. I'm trying to help you keep your job here, so you'd have to learn to do the job the way we do it. So if later, once you've proven to be cooperative and listening and teachable, you say, well, in our old job, we used to do this. Later, after you've proven yourself a permanent employee, you can offer ideas. But at this point, we didn't hire you as a consultant. We hired you temporarily as a possible employee. That's okay to say in a loving way. If you have a snotty tone to your voice, that's really not going to help you or him. You also, third thing you want to say to this person, we have procedures in place for a reason and we need you to follow them. Apparently, he doesn't. Not the way you did them at your old job. Same thing, just with slightly different words. You say, you're not at your old job. We have different procedures and regulations to satisfy here, so you need to listen to how we do it here. And then in a few years, you can decide that you want to go about improving things, like maybe when you have my job, but not now. You continue. Actually, you conclude. As I type these words, I realize I sound very controlling, but we must follow these procedures in order to be legally compliant. It's obvious he's already afraid, and I don't want to cause him additional fear. Yes, I realize that's his choice, but I don't want to participate in increasing his fear by my unloving words. Well, what you've said here, honey, has not been unloving. You're trying to help him and you're trying to help the workplace, and I've just given you some words where you can accomplish both if he decides to listen. Your tone of voice matters a lot. If he interrupts you and you're irritated when you describe that this isn't helpful, you're not really learning anything about the employee. It's like with the child. If you're irritated at a child, you're not going to learn anything about whether the child's going to learn this thing, because they're going to fight you. They're going to fight you just because you're irritated, because you're telling them you don't care about them. And adults are just larger little children. If you're impatient, you're screwed, and he won't learn. So if you try some of these words and you're not impatient with him, you will find out whether he's hireable. That's all. You're not trying to make him hireable. You get that? That's not the goal. With a temporary employee, your goal is not to make them permanent. With a temporary employee, your goal is to gather information, much like dating. A temporary employee is like interviewing a date. New subject. My girlfriend and I have broken up and come back together more times than I can count in the last year. If you can't count the times that you've broken up in the last year, that might be like, a clue. You said, my first wife filled all my needs and I loved it. Well, who wouldn't? You could also have hired a servant and a stand-up comedian and a whole bunch of other people, and they would have served your needs too. I later learned that she was not his deceased wife. He said, my first wife filled all my needs and I loved it, which makes it sound like, she was a saint and died, and so now he's looking for it. No, it was his ex-wife. So her filling all of his needs was apparently not the answer to a happy marriage. Do you see the deception here? He actually believes that she filled his needs, but they're divorced. So either there's something wrong with this picture right from the beginning. That's all I'm saying. It's caring about each other that matters, not one person being a servant to the other. So she might have filled all of his needs. He may be, for example, the person who's writing this, so I just as well address him as you. You may be, for example, a complete narcissist, and you loved it that she filled all of your needs, but you filled none of hers, and so she left you. That's not called a great relationship. And if you're looking for somebody else to fill that job, to fill all of your needs, you will find somebody like that, because you'll be clever and you'll be charming and romantic, and you'll find somebody like that, and it will end up like the first one. So we need to talk some more about this. You said, I'm beginning to wonder whether my girlfriend and I should even try to get back together again. Oh, that one's easy. No. I'll repeat it again because you might have missed it the first time. No. You have far too much to learn. You need to feel unconditionally loved yourself. You don't even know what happened in your first marriage. If she filled all your needs and you two aren't married anymore, something went on that you don't even understand because you didn't begin to state it. It's not just about having your needs met. You need to learn to unconditionally love somebody else, and that's going to take some time and practice and trust and more. So go to the website and look up the entry in one of the drop downs called Finding Real Love and get to work. New subject. I had kind of a light bulb moment when I realized just how much effort and intent it can take to change our lives. Yeah. I also realized how utterly naive I was in the early days of real love as to what it would take. I had no clue. Well, no kidding. For nearly all of us, actually, maybe all of us. It's pretty much impossible to prepare people for how much real love is going to change their lives, and for how many diligent steps and how much awareness it will take. Your old way of living is like an enormous boulder rolling down a hill, and it's been rolling down the same hill pretty much the same way, occasionally bouncing from side to side for a lifetime. You don't even notice what it is. Changing the direction of that boulder, or even stopping it and lifting it back up the hill, yeah, that's going to require a little, at least awareness, often effort. Overall, however, living in a loving way is easier than not. You continue. I'm understanding at a more fundamental level why you place so much emphasis on the fact that this is not an intellectual process, and that real love has to be felt. It has to be deeply and personally experienced. I'm sure you remember what I was like in the beginning and how much that has changed. And the hell that we went through with our teenage daughter, Selena. It was a lot of work. Traumatic, actually. In the beginning, I thought maybe we could just go to a seminar, bring her along. She would see what her behavior was like and just, change. What a joke. What a joke that was on me. The reality is that it took a whole sequence of events, consequences, and choices by her, and with my unflinching love and guidance. Actually, I flinched a lot, but overall I didn't give up. No, you didn't give up. So many parents want an easy solution. So many parents call me or write me and say, can you fix my child? Well, no, I can't. It's all going to end up being about you. In fact, their child has to be pretty old before I let a parent even bring them here with them, like as in their 20s. Because all of the work that's going to be done is going to be after the parent has learned to be more loving themselves. And when they first feel loved here, I'm going to make a negligible difference with the child in a brief period of time that they visit. And so parents want it to be easy. They read the principles, and then they get to their first no to a child, where the parent says no, and they're screwed. They can't stand the thought of the child's disapproval. One man with several children. This is a grown man with a business who looks competent and strong and all put together, literally burst into tears in my presence at the thought of telling his daughter that she had to do her homework before she went out and played with her friends. I'm not kidding. He burst into tears. That's how much he needed her approval, which he called, by the way, her love. He said, my daughter loves me unconditionally. No, your daughter doesn't love you unconditionally at all. Your daughter really loves it that you're a pushover and that she gets to be entitled, but that's not loving. Not even like close. He couldn't risk losing her approval. So in the end, he listened to pretty much not a thing I said. He was just too afraid of her. So he did lose her approval because he let her be entitled, and eventually you can't satisfy a sufficiently entitled person. You can't give them enough. They'll start taking body parts off of you. And because then she did become disapproving and he couldn't make his little princess happy, then he lost her too. She started on drugs. She got pregnant. She lived with her boyfriend in his parents' house. It was a horrifying mess, all because the father gave up on the principles of parenting at the first difficult moment. No kidding. It all goes back to that. Parents call me when they have difficulties with their 2-year-old, and they'll say, well, I make them do whatever behavior it is that they have to do, go to bed on time, most of the time. And I'm going, well, then don't do it at all. They say, well, what do you mean? I say, to a child, most is like an introduction to Las Vegas. It's gambling. And the kid's going, I'm willing to gamble. I'm willing to break all the rules and see what happens, because most of the time you don't do anything. You either have to be 100% consistent with the child or don't bother. You continue. I could never have imagined this process, and you could not have told me in the beginning all that it would involve, because it just evolved as we went. It took her sneaking out of the house in the middle of the night over and over. It took me discovering what she was doing for real by checking her phone, which I had to get from, under her mattress while she was asleep. It took her running away repeatedly, followed by interventions by police, social services. It took her protesting rules of any kind that I proposed. It took her self-cutting. It took hospital admissions, suicide watch, interview by child protection detective, removal from school, eventually changing schools, removal of all privileges. I'm not making this up. I'm reading this from the parent. Removal of all privileges, 0 electronics for 3 months, homeschooling. Eventually, this kid was causing so much trouble that she couldn't even be trusted to go to school and not break the rules and skip school and go to a friend's house. Eventually, she had to be homeschooled. It took all that, you say, and more. And it is still requiring a huge amount of vigilance and love to keep her close and on the path. I'm discovering that if I turn my attention away for more than a moment, she will likely wander off again. But right now, she's joyful, playful, cooperative. It was worth all that it took. You said 2 little things there at the end that are important. You said, it's like I can't turn away my attention for a moment. I had a parent call me the other day and say, this 2-year-old, I can't even turn around, and he's up on the counter and he's handling knives and he's throwing things. And am I raising a psychopath? I said, no, he's 2. He's 2. You just can't turn your back on a 2-year-old. Or you have to put everything away. You take your pick. But they require constant supervision because they have a great deal more energy than you do. And they haven't seen these things before. And they don't know that it will hurt their little sister if they poke her with a knife or stick a fork in her leg. And so, well, they're curious. I mean, who wouldn't want to know what it's like to stick a fork in your sister's leg? You also said it was worth all that it took. It takes a lot of things. Like the father I was talking about. He wanted a quick fix. Never happens like that. Never. We got them in the position where they are with a lot of bad parenting. And then we want to do some good parenting for, 5-6 minutes and change all that around. Good luck. If you want a happy life for yourself or members of your family, you can plan on incredible diligence. Not necessarily more work, but certainly diligence and awareness. You continue. Last night we went to parents' evening at her new school. The feedback from all the teachers was lovely to hear. She has settled in well, and her grades have gone up from about 40%, average about 6 months ago, 40% is well below an F, to 80% now across most subjects. Yeah, that would be a considerable improvement. If a stock improved its growth from 40% to 80%, the stockholders would be very happy. The teachers say that she's a pleasure to teach. Bet you never thought you'd hear that. She's really enjoying learning there. It's fun to see her enjoying learning. Of course it is. Another cool thing was the contrast in her being around me at parents' evening at school. In the past, she's been embarrassed to have me there and was fearful and controlling. She was worried about what I was going to wear, what I might say, how I walked, how I sat. And when we were there this time, when we were there before, she would be hostile or distant or disengaged. But last night, she actually held my hand at parents' night. This is with other students and kids around. That's actually kind of unbelievable, kind of tear-jerking. She held my hand the whole time we were there and leaned against me. And in between appointments, asked for hugs, played with my hair. She was so relaxed. A couple of teachers even remarked at the fact that we were holding hands because they'd never seen it before in all their years of teaching. Imagine. She remarked afterwards that she felt grateful to have a mom that she could feel close to and that none of the other girls seemed close to their parents at all. They looked all pretty scared, in fact. So how are you feeling now about all those steps that you had to take? And I listed them very fast because there were a whole lot of them. How do you feel about them now? They were difficult. Wow, were they worth it? And had you done less, the other night at parents' night wouldn't have happened. Some things, if you put in half an effort, you don't get half a result. You get nothing. If you go to pick up a 100-pound weight and you exert a 50-pound force, not a thing happens. Nothing. It doesn't wiggle, it doesn't move, it doesn't lift a little bit, it doesn't go half as high as you want it to. And the same is true with parenting. Do half an effort, you don't get a half well-behaved child. No, you get to visit them in jail. So to everybody who's listening, this mother simply did what was required. She didn't argue and fuss and say, I'm going to do it. She just did it. She read the parenting book and just did it. As opposed to most parents who read the parenting book and they complain that it's hard. Like the father I described earlier. Oh, I couldn't tell her she has to do her homework like that was some inquisitional torture. He said it was just too hard. Well, too bad, because that's your job. It is your job to see to it that she does her homework. Not really hers, because you haven't taught her that it was hers. Eventually, it does become her job. But in the beginning, no, that's your job. But this woman loved her daughter enough to do the hard stuff. She loved her daughter enough, pay attention, to have her daughter on many occasions scream, I hate you. I wish you were not my mother. I wish you were dead. I was there. I got to hear it. But the mother was willing to hear that and persist in doing what was right. Hero. In the newspaper, we read about killings and drugs and everything else that's terrible. We don't read about heroic mothers. This woman should be on the front page of the newspaper. She continues. She also noticed that in between appointments with teachers, everybody was buried in their phones, both the girls and the parents. I just said that her feeling close to me was because of the choices she had made. That's very cool that you gave her the credit, even though in the beginning, she just fought you like a wildcat. I reminded her, you say, of what we had heard on one of the video chats, that we don't need to do anything ever to be loved. But we do need to do things and make choices to feel loved. And she did those things. And now she was reaping the rewards. I mean, this is just touching. This is just becoming more heroic by the moment. You continue. I'm acutely aware that this is just one point in time, and there's more to learn. Right now, she's on a boy detox. which means she's not exchanging messages on social media with any boys. Now, pay attention to this, everybody who's listening. She made that choice. The girl did. The teenage girl observed that her whole life was utterly distracted when she was communicating with boys. So she said to her mother, "Would you please help me? I want to be on a boy detox." You believe that? Believe you're hearing this? This is what happens when you love your kids. She said, because it's just too stressful when I'm communicating with boys and trying to do my homework and blah, 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 blah. You continue. She's also only got access to a laptop at defined times and right now has no smartphone. Again, her choice, the daughter's choice. She's observed that she goes crazy when she's on video or screen time all the time. It makes a huge difference to how happy she is. Electronics are one of the greatest dangers in the world right now. Really, like right up there with, global warming, civil wars, not joking, lack of clean water. It creates a virtual world. There's a movie coming out soon called Ready Player One, and it's a rendition, not entirely accurate, of a book I once read, a science fiction book, where the world has become so horrible that people have pretty much disappeared into virtual worlds through their computers. Put a headset on, and they are somewhere else. As you watch this movie, if you choose to, I don't care, I haven't seen it yet, we're just about there. Children disappear into these virtual worlds because the worlds they live in aren't fulfilling or loving or fun or, anything good. It creates a virtual world. Endless social media, texting, games, porn, it all makes them not here in the present. All of those things I just named, I'm not condemning any particular feature of any of them. Social media, I'm not condemning people who use it. Texting, games, porn, they all remove us from being here. My children didn't grow up with these things. But if I had them, if I'd had my children, or if I had those things while I was raising my children, they wouldn't have any electronics at all. None, except for computer to do schoolwork, which these days apparently you just kind of have to have. The benefits of having all of that electronic stuff, there are some benefits. They make some friendships. They connect with people. They can send pictures to their grandmother. People regale me with stories of all the benefits of being on Facebook, blah, 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 blah. And I'm not making this up. If the benefits on a scale of 0 to 100 or 2, the dangers are 98. So if you had a stock, you had 2 stocks to purchase, and one had a 2% chance of increasing its value, and the other one had a 98% chance of increasing its value, which one would you buy? Return on investment. So, there are some good things about some of the electronics, but overall, they are dangerous. Like a gun. Are there good uses to having a gun? Yeah, not very many. If I'm out in the woods and I'm attacked by a grizzly bear, I'd have to have a really big gun. A pistol wouldn't do. I'd kill the bear before I'd allow the bear to kill my family. It's not like I'm going to be in a situation like that. Overall, carrying a gun, overall having guns around is pretty dangerous. And I'm not one of those who's a rabid, nobody should have guns, and I don't take political stands either way. We have to evaluate the relative risk versus benefit. And electronics are at risk. The benefits are teeny. You continue. The cool thing is she's just starting to become aware of the difference in how she feels herself, rather than as a result of me teaching her. That's a golden moment when a kid goes, "Mom, I'm happier when I'm not on Facebook all the time." Hang on just a second. Let me get my phone and record that while you say that again, so I can remind you later. When the kid notices that they're happier, you've really gotten somewhere, because then they'll start to curb their own behavior. you continue. It's glorious to watch her not get involved in the activities that are destroying the kids around her. And she's seeing that they're getting destroyed. The pull of imitation love at her age, perhaps at any age, but I'm watching her, is so strong. Right now, I am enjoying seeing her open, happy face, and I'm grateful for everything that has led us both to right here. And I'm doing a dance in my head. Is this fun or what, huh? Every parent, listen to this. This is what it takes. And the rewards are huge. You don't do what it takes, it's death, like in some cases, literally. New subject. This is from a woman who works at a school where she is a teacher's assistant. They didn't have these when I was in school, so this is a new position. Used to be there was just the teacher, and you sat with the same teacher all day long, and then they went from room to room, and you had a science teacher and an English teacher, and now they have teaching assistants who give extra time to this kid and that kid and help the teacher carry out whatever the program of the day is. So she's a teacher's assistant, and she has tried on occasion to introduce loving and teaching the kids to the teachers. Because some teachers, just like some parents, tend to either be enabling or they tend to be harsh. So this teacher's assistant was trying to teach the principle of loving and teaching. But that has gone really slowly, if not with great difficulty, because there's a handful of occupations where you can almost guarantee that almost everybody in them is going to be difficult to teach. And teachers are one of them. They're put in a position where they're told, you know everything, and it's your job to teach everybody else. Teachers are slow to learn. And this is at a school of special needs kids. So these are kids who very often, in addition to having some disabilities, like with reading and so on, have difficulties with behavior. So she writes, one of my students is Alan, who is 11, very pleasant and engaged all the time. He rarely reacts to other people's behavior, which is not the case with his classmates. And he simply makes us aware if one of the other students becomes impossibly intrusive. He goes to a teacher and says, this kid keeps kicking the back of my chair. That's amazing maturity in an 11-year-old. One day this week, he accidentally, like turned, and we've all done it. You've been in the kitchen with a partner cooking and turned and with a hot pan accidentally grazed the person who was helping you cook. It was an accident. He hurt another pupil or friend that he was just playing with. I don't know, maybe he dropped a block on his toe or something. The teachers insisted that Alan, the well-behaved kid who just had an accident, the teachers insisted that he say he was sorry, and he refused. This is an unusually bright kid, brighter than people think. He refused because he said, but you have to be sorry for things you did to people on purpose, and this was just an accident. So why should I be sorry? Pretty smart at 11. The teachers got frustrated because he hasn't given in to their demands that he apologize. So they keep at it. They keep piling on him. So one teacher spoke to his mother about sanctions that would be brought against this 11-year-old. I don't know, line him up against the wall and have all the other kids shoot him with, hunting guns. Astonishing. And yet these same teachers put up with students who have behaved far worse than this Allen kid for a very long time. And now they're going to focus on this kid. I think there's only one conclusion that I could come to. They're bullies. Bullies pick on the weak kid. So the misbehaving children fight back if the teachers attempt to bully them. Alan has never fought back. And now finally he's going, no, I'm not going to apologize. And they don't know what to do. You continue. My email is based on the fact that there is a school expectation to say sorry, although I know the real love perspective on the subject. Would you be willing to proof what I want to say to them? I've tried to be clear, but not lecturing. How's my tone? Any corrections or additions would be appreciated. A lot of people do this with me. If they're going to write a letter to somebody or speak to somebody, they say, so am I being snotty? Because very often we don't know that we are being. Here's my suggestion. She's going to write, the teacher's assistant. Here's my suggestion about Alan. Although him not saying sorry to his playmate or his classmate is possibly inconsiderate, unkind, not acceptable, I understand his mental and emotional reasoning. So I make the following suggestion. Alan must have been made to feel very guilty instead of being just taught in the past when hurting people, whether people meant to make him feel guilty or not, probably at home. That's really analytical, and the teachers won't hear this. They just won't. You continue. This feeling of guilt, especially for a child, is unbearable, almost crushing. The beliefs causing this feeling are close to I am bad or I'm not worthy of anything. And anything along those lines just is injurious to a child. Again, that's a lot of explanation, and it presumes that the people you're writing to will accept the principles of real love. You understand them. They don't. So they're very unlikely to hear this. I wouldn't send this at all to the teacher that's insisting on the sorry. She's not going to hear you. She's got it into her bully head that she's going to make this child say, I'm sorry. Now, I would just guess that the rate at which she says she's sorry to a child is substandard, but she's going to bully this kid until he does. She's not going to hear you. So what can you do? You don't have to do this, obviously. I would take Alan aside, the 11-year-old, and I would say, I completely understand why you wouldn't want to say you're sorry. That's called, by the way, listening. You're listening to the kid. I understand why you would say that. It was an accident. And now you're going to teach him out of the course called life, the course that kids never get taught. They get taught algebra and making things out of clay, but they don't get taught how to live. You say to Alan, because it's apparent that he's pretty bright, sometimes other people need to hear those words to feel better. So I'm not making you do this. Would you be willing to say that you're sorry to, the person that you accidentally hurt, just so that he feels better, so the teacher feels better, and so this whole thing just sort of stops? She did that, and it was over. She talked to Alan. Alan apologized, even though he said now it was just an accident, and she said, I know. You're doing this for the benefit of other people who don't understand this as well as you do. And that's not being condescending or talking about the other people. It's like my children came home from school and they said, because we live in the South, and when we first moved here, they came home from school and they said, the teachers would ask me a question, I would answer the question, and the teachers would say, and we didn't know what they were talking about. And then we finally caught on because the teachers told us we're supposed to end every sentence virtually with ma'am and sir. And they said, do we have to say ma'am and sir to adults here? Because they had just moved here to the South. And I said, no, you don't. Demanding respect of another person isn't respect. It's just being a bully. But if you don't say ma'am and sir to these people whose culture demands it from everybody who's younger than you, you're going to pay for it. Your grades will drop. For teachers grading an essay, multiple choice, maybe not, but grading an essay and decides, is it a 90 or a 95? They'll give you a 90 or less, just because they don't like you, because they see you as disrespectful, because they don't understand the culture in which you were raised. My kids went, this is just like with the kid Alan. They went, Okay, makes sense. Went to school. They said ma'am or sir with no sarcasm. Doesn't do any good to answer the teacher and then go, sir, your grade's not going to go up after that. And the problem was gone. There are some things that are not worth fighting for. And so it turns out that my children were loving to their teachers and paying attention to their cultural and emotional needs. Well, sometimes positions are reversed. Sometimes kids need to be taught that if they're loving toward adults, it's just going to make life easier for everybody. New subject. This person says, this morning I was listening to a video chat and the email you were discussing sounded just like me. But that's not uncommon. People will write me and say, I heard the video chat that was about me, and I'm going, you don't realize there are about 100 people that I know who do exactly that same thing, but it might have been about them. I don't usually answer that question. You continue. The person you were talking about was taking responsibility for things that were not their responsibility. There are people who were taught by their parents that everything is their fault, the child's fault. And the parents do that for obvious reasons. When they were kids, everything was their fault, and they didn't like that feeling. So when they got to be parents, they made everything their children's fault. You continue. So I have felt responsible for almost everybody all my life, even strangers. I know. And since I know you personally, I know where you were taught that. You were taught that at home. You continue. I think this comes from fear and feelings of worthlessness. Absolutely. And from being blamed and criticized. And it was the water you swam in. It was the air you breathed. So because you were blamed and criticized, you felt worthless and afraid, and you just keep doing it now as an adult. You say, I need to be more aware of these behaviors. It's such a habit, and I'm unsure of how to recognize them in the moment so I can stop them immediately. I have been working on not over-explaining myself to people when I ask them to help me, so that will help me not feel small. In other words, normally in the past, if she asked somebody to help, she would go into this long monologue about how she needed help, about how she'd helped that other person before. She just had to justify every request. And now she's just saying to somebody, would you help me do this? Psh, done. One sentence. Good for you. That's a good start. That's a good way to not take responsibility for how other people feel about you or respond to you. Over-explaining yourself means that you're taking responsibility for how they feel and you're trying to change it. You continue. I'm trying to think of suggestions to help me be more aware. Right now, the only thought that comes to mind is for me to write down the instances where I take responsibility that is not mine, so I am mindful of what I did, so I gradually become more aware, and eventually I stop the behavior. Oh, everybody who's listening, play that back, because yeah, that's like the best way to stop a behavior. Note it. Just be aware. And because we are naturally good people, I haven't met anybody who is innately bad. There might be somebody somewhere. I haven't met them. We're innately good people. And if we know what's true, if we know what's right, if we know what makes us happier, we will tend over time, maybe not immediately, maybe not 100%, but we will tend over time to do it. Then she said, you continue. Do you have any suggestions? Well, I'm impressed, for one thing. But how's it going with your taking responsibility for your daughter? She has an adult daughter, and I happen to know that she takes responsibility for her adult daughter's behavior constantly. So I thought, well, you said you're taking some steps. Let's get specific. How are you doing with this? She responded, I'm like somebody taking 2 steps forward and then 1 step back and taking responsibility for her. We'll call her, I don't know, Jill. A couple of months ago, I told her that she couldn't come and stay at the house anymore because every time she'd come to the house, she would break the rules, wouldn't clean up after herself, would have friends over when I wasn't there, would make a mess, leave it for me to take care of, blah, 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 blah. So I told her she couldn't come over, and she didn't come over for a good while. But during the Christmas holidays, I relented and I let her stay a few nights because she said she would abide by my rules when she was home. Yeah, well, so far in her life, so this lady's daughter is, I don't know, 25. And from age 12, this girl hasn't kept the rules ever. So the likelihood that she would keep the rules of her mother's house this time were exceptionally remote. You continue. Jill came home last weekend and violated several more of the rules of being here. I was stupid for thinking that there had been enough time for her to learn anything. She was just biding her time and lulling me into believing that she would follow my rules. Do you have any idea how many times you had fallen for this? She'll make you a promise and you go, oh, good, she understands. A promise with words doesn't mean one thing. Turns out that most promises made in writing aren't worth a whole lot more. Behavior says everything. So what do you watch for? You watch for the way she treats you when she's around you. If she's disrespectful and flippant and talks to people on the phone while she's with you, do you think she respects you? No. So do you think she's going to respect the rules of your house when she comes over? No. If she comes over to the house while you're there and you eat dinner together and she doesn't volunteer to help clean up, you think she's going to keep the house clean when she comes to the house while you're not there? No. So what tells you the story about whether she's going to keep the rules is her behavior. Her words don't mean, and I'm not exaggerating, they mean nothing. She has learned over a long period of time that she can deceive you with her words, so she uses them. Who wouldn't? You have trained her that if she says the right thing, you'll give her what she wants. Now you're going to have to train her differently. You conclude, it felt like a bit of a slap in the face when she didn't keep the rules. But I know I allowed it to happen. Good for you. And it will keep happening until you hold your ground and keep observing her and let her come to the house when you can see that she will keep the rules. And until you do, here's the biggest problem. It's not your daughter disrespecting you at your house. It's not your daughter breaking the rules. Yeah, that's going to end up hurting her, but she's now 25 and pretty much out of your influence. Not entirely, but mostly. The worst thing that happens here every time she comes to your house and disrespects you is that you feel small. You feel small. And so you fall for it the next time. You feel small, and so you fall for crummy relationships with guys. You feel small, so your employees at work disrespect you. Your feeling small and worthless affects everything in your life. So at some point, you have to make a decision. You're not going to do this anymore. You talked about it at the beginning, paying attention to the times that you take responsibility for things that are other people's responsibility. And that's why I brought up your daughter. This is a chance to practice it very specifically. Ask yourself over and over again, like I recommend we all do every time, how would this situation be changed if I brought love into it? If you felt loved and important and valued and worthwhile all the time, you wouldn't be having these problems at work. You wouldn't be taking responsibility for other people's problems because they dump them on your head. You wouldn't be taking the disrespect of your daughter in your own house. She can be disrespectful to you all she wants to in her house, but not in yours. Everything changes when you feel loved. And when you do, then you will begin to be able to love other people. It's a pretty cool way to live. I recommend it. We'll see you in a week.